Welcome, 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 everybody. You are here on time. We love you. And actually, I'm going to just start by giving a prompt in the chat for all you on time people. What is, what are we talking about today? Media. What is a moment in media that moved you recently? Something digital, something online. It could be a meme, it could be a video, it could be a quip. What's something that is memorable that stuck out in your head? Introduce yourself in the chat and share the goodness with the rest of us. Because we are all learning about media together. And it is a big, wide, overwhelming world of media. There's a lot of bad stuff, there's a lot of great stuff. And when we share the great stuff with each other and with others, then it expands our world. So welcome everyone. I'm Billy Wimsett, the ED of Movement Voter Project. And as people are coming in, yeah, enough about me. As people are coming in, I just want to give some quick notes. This is a nonpartisan call. Nonpartisan call. And this is really important because a lot of times when people think about digital media, you think, oh, that's a lot of partisan stuff. Actually, what the right wing has done so well is they have used nonpartisan money to create community, to create worldview. Think about PragerU, think about Turning Point USA. PragerU alone has $72 million a year budget. Turning Point, $80 million a year plus budget, all C3 money that they are using year round to build community, worldview, belonging. And that is really important. And we haven't been doing that, but we are going to start doing that in bigger and bigger ways. Actually, I shouldn't say that with Way to Win on the call, who has been doing that, who's been leading in this space and others. So this is a nonpartisan call. Yes, we're going to email the slides and the recording in 1 to 2 days. During the presentation, which is going to start soon, we're going to pause the chat so people can be present and focus and not be overwhelmed with media communications, which is already so overwhelming. And you can ask questions in the Zoom Q&A feature. And we just want to acknowledge that people are in a lot of different places. There's a spectrum. Some of you are media mavens, you know all about it. Some of you are totally new to this space and are just learning, 101 stuff. And so we're going to try to speak to the whole spectrum today and just want to let you know that it's okay to ask us anything. We're going to have, after the first core part of the presentation, the first close to an hour, we're going to open it up for Q&A and have kind of like a podcast style discussion about our questions, your questions, and we have a great crew here today. So let's get into that. So we are going to first hear from Rynn Reed, our new MVP Strategic Media Advisor, which is a new position we've created here at MVP to give some framing. Then we're going to hear from Minister JaNaé Bates, who's the co-ED of Isaiah and Faith in Minnesota, which is one of our incredible partners in Minnesota. You may have heard about the Minnesota Miracle that she is one of the architects and leaders of. We're actually coming out with a Minnesota Miracle movie soon that we're going to share with y'all that she's one of the stars in, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, they have a model in Minnesota. When you're listening to JaNaé talk about Minnesota, think about, whoa, what if this model existed in Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, all over the country? They have an amazing model that we are working with them and partners to think about how to spread it appropriately. And then we're going to hear from our amazing partners slash mentors, people we've learned from, look up to in this space, Jen Fernandez Ancona and Glennis Meagher from Way to Win, Way to Rise, who have just been incredible leaders in the space and who we're partnering with on all this. So that is the run of show, and then we'll have half an hour of Q&A and talking. So let's dive in. Okay, Before we dive in, I just want to zoom out to the big picture and contextualize media in the larger set of conversations we've been having, because MVP, what are we known for? Funding local organizing. So why are we talking about media here? Well, after the election, many of you have read this piece that we put out called we call it the Seven Questions Memo. Have you seen this, the Seven Questions Memo? If you haven't, it's on the front page of movement.vote. We really recommend people read this because the world has changed and we have to adapt to the changed world we're in. We have to fight in this brave new world. And so there's a long memo listening to the biggest questions that are out there and our responses to them. And the central argument of the Seven Questions memo that we've been missing in all the hot takes is that the other side has actually built a superior model to our model. And we have to learn from it. We have to adapt. We call that model the vertically integrated metachurch. Vertically integrated from foot soldiers to the billionaires, all the way, they think it's all the way up to God. It's not, but that is part of what they believe. And also, it has the feeling of a megachurch in the sense that it's a scaled sense of belonging and purpose, and that people have an evangelical fervor about, including secular people on the other side, have an evangelical fervor about this movement. And it doesn't just exist in real life context, it exists in a meta context, in a digital context, in listening to hours and hours of podcasts and parasocial relationships online that are then mirrored in real life. So they have built this integrated model. Our model is siloed. It's a little of this and a little of that and a little, and hopefully it'll all add up. And it didn't add up. And that's a problem. And we are trying to fix it. We are doing disruptive things on our side to try to figure out how to do this better. So if you joined the call that we did in June, it was about how do we make organizing better? How do we do bigger, better, deeper, transformational organizing at scale that really moves hearts and minds? Today is a companion to that. It's about media. And basically what we're trying to do is figure out how do you make organizing better? How do you make media better? How do you connect the two? And the truth is, and we're still in the process of figuring this all out, right? If there was a simple solution to this, we would have figured it out. We are in a generative place with our partners of figuring out how we create a better model. It's a lot of transformational work. We're in the middle of that process, and we're inviting you on this journey with us. This is not, we have all the answers, just give us $100 million and we'll solve the problem. We are so this call today is primarily educational. It's like we are doing a new thing together. We're going to invite you into the conversation. And yes, absolutely, if you have not donated this year, you should be donating, because if we want things to look different in 2028, we have to invest really big in 2028, right? No, wrong. We cannot wait until 2028 if we want it to be different. If we want it to be different in 2028, we have to invest in 2025. This is our R&D year. This is when smart donors invest strategically to make things different and better in all these brilliant people we're working with who are trying to make it different and better, and the money isn't there. So that is what we have to do. And I'm passionate about this because I'm listening to all these brilliant ideas, and I'm like, I'm sorry we can't give you any money. We don't have money right now. So please, if you haven't figured out your donation plan, figure it out, move it with whatever partners, whatever groups you believe in, whether it's us or any of our partners or whatever you believe in, moving it this year is really important. And I went off script. I'm going to go off script again and just say, I was a skeptic of investing in media. We've invested a little. I actually come from media. I was a hip hop journalist in the 90s, and I have a media brain, but I love local organizing. I love people talking to people. I believe in humans in community talking to humans. And when I think about investing in media, when MVP first started, our motto was invest in local organizing or fund local organizing, not TV ads. And a lot of times when we think of media, we think of like, oh God, I'm gonna like give $1 million and it's gonna what's gonna do? It's gonna like go into some pixels and then it'll be flushed down the internet toilet. It's not gonna like really change anything and move real people in real life. And what I've gotten convinced by especially over the last year, it kind of hit us all in the head, and good organizers, a lot of good organizers have been doing this and experimenting with this, is that they see digital organizing and new media as an extension of organizing. Instead of just door knocks, there's DMs. What are DMs? Direct messages online, right? Someone's commenting in a chat and they're like, I'm a pissed off parent. And they're like, oh, I'm a pissed off parent too. Who are you? Let's talk. Let's have lunch. Now they're doing it in real life, And so my dream actually is we invest in making organizing better and we invest in making media better at a large scale and we connect these two. If you think about the heart of what organizing is, if you're trained as an organizer, you're trained to look for people who have social capital, leaders in a community, right? Here's, traditionally like, you know, often the woman on the block who knows everyone, Miss Smith, if you can get her involved, you're organizing the community, right? It turns out over the last 10 years, people have been building social capital, especially young people who we lost. Where have they been building social capital? Online, right? And so we have to think of people who are organizing online just like we do in real life organizers. It's just another way of doing it. So our heads have been exploding with this and trying to figure this out with our partners. And we are so lucky. I'm going to pass it now to Rynn Reed, who we is a really rare person we discovered in like a very uh, cool moment in her evolution. She was an organizer and a political campaigner with working families, with Run for Something. And I won't spoil her story, but basically she's someone who like really puts together the strategy and tactics of organizing and political and campaigning with knowing all about the internet and how it works and really being a visionary internet strategist. So it's been so great to have her on our team. We've learned so much from her. And with that, I will pass it to Rynn Reed.
Billy, thank you so much. Yeah, so I do not come to this work explicitly from media. I've done comms and digital strategy for campaigns and movement. But I really started becoming a little obsessed with this about 5 years ago. My little sister was having, I apologize, my dog in the background. My little sister was in a little bit of a dark place and sending me content online that was, I didn't have any relationship to it. And I was like, oh, this is like a little troubling. And I ended up figuring out that she had an algorithm that was feeding her this content, which just means that online she was getting this stuff and like liking it, and it was kind of recycling. So I started sending her stuff that was different. And like over time, it took about 5 months, but I started to realize that she was changing. Her algorithm was changing. The things she was sending me were changing. And I started to realize, like, as an organizer, as a movement builder, we can't just knock on a door and expect to change people when the thing that they're engaged with 7 to 10 hours a day is this feed, this algorithm that is pushing them in one direction or another. We need to like figure out how to hack those things and how to be organizers in a very different mindset. So that's kind of the strategy I brought to the work, and this like new goal of ours, which is winning hearts and minds. So we can actually go to the next slide. So yeah, like what does it mean to win hearts and minds? It means that when we're knocking on a door, people recognize us, and we've seen the effects of that in small local organizing. If you knock on the door of somebody who who knows your organization, they're just much more likely to have a conversation with you. And I think that to me is how these layered effects can happen and how we can can use our media strategies in an organizing context. And we're hoping to do that within MVP. So you've got to organize the internet, right? And that is a massive, massive task. It's a really large place, but I think there's a lot of great strategists out there doing this work in a lot of ways. It's really a matter of being connective tissue and recognizing that there are stories on the ground that are not being told at national levels. There's national stories that are not making their way into the local levels with the right frame. Like this top-down, bottom-up engagement that we really can have an effect on if we are in spaces other people are. So this is our new media 101. We're just going to go through a little bit of background to make sure that everyone's kind of meeting each other on the same playing field, and also go through like some of the right-wing tactics that have been so effective. So what is new media? Let's just like get this like baseline. So new media is not new media, right? This stuff has been around for a long time, but it is becoming the like biggest news source and just source of information generally for people who are on their phones. These things are attached to us. So it's a means of mass communication using digital technologies such as the internet, but it can also use other things where we can just scale, right? Scale digitally. So mass communication to me is the key here. Is, you know, we are never going to be able to knock on every door in America, but we very well could be seen on every phone in America, and that is like an option of ours, right? So what does it look like to make sure that our brilliant on the ground tactics are translating to that space? So Billy kind of said this already, but new media organizing can look like DMs as like an effective way of communicating with people, right? Like actually messaging someone and building a relationship there rather than knocking on their door where, you know, I do think especially post-COVID, people are a little bit more hesitant, right, to be in that space. Oh yeah, direct message is a social media term. You see a little bubble and you talk to them, you have a direct conversation rather than like posting to the public. I like this one a lot. Like rally signs as a template for viral social post, right? Like, and a viral social post, usually called a meme, is something that people want to share. They're like, that's funny. That says all the things I'm thinking, but in really simple, concrete terms. And like, this is a real tactic of the right wing that use this quite a bit. These distilling of ideas into a binary that we are then forced into and have to make a decision about. But it's really, really effective for like kind of hacking people's brains. And then local leaders as online creators, and vice versa, right? I think my last year and a half or so of like very specifically organizing content creators has taught me that these folks want to be in their local communities. Like local leaders want to be online leaders want to be in their community. There is a lot of synergy here. And some of this will just take breaking down the wall of like online to offline as the only way that things can go, because they can go offline to online. Like these things are actually much more connected than I think we've thought of them in the past. Okay. So this is just landscaping, like what's doing well. Is Facebook dead? No, it's not. Lots of Facebook users still across age ranges. So these are just like a little bit of where people are at. Like TikTok really had a moment starting in 2020 and started to take off. But the truth is there are so many social media apps. Like that's just the unfortunate reality. We're not going to be able to be on all of them, but we should figure out where the bases we want to move are so that we can effectively be present in those spaces and feel like digital natives in them. And not everyone's going to be a digital native, but we need to take very seriously the people who are good at this, because they're our partners. And we should always think of things in a big tent of not just ideology, where we can win, where we can meet, but also tactics and skill sets, right? If you have a volunteer who's a Reddit moderator, which is just somebody who like controls a forum, like they are valuable in the way that a block leader would be. And that's something that we really, a new frame and a new mindset that I think is really important for organizing this space. Okay, and we're gonna watch a quick video. I just want to give it a little frame. So this is Jesse Waters, who's a Fox News correspondent, talking about what the like left, and I say that very broadly, gets wrong about online space and what the right gets correct. And he just says it plainly. So I think I'm going to let him do it for us.
Dana, we are waging a 21st century information warfare campaign against the left, and they are using tactics from the 1990s. They are holding tiny press conferences, tiny little rallies. They're screaming into the ether on MSNBC. This is what you call top-down command and control. You get your talking points from a newspaper and you put it on the broadcast network and then it disappears. What you're seeing on the right is asymmetrical. It's like grassroots guerrilla warfare. Someone says something on social media, Musk retweets it, Rogan podcasts it, Fox broadcasts it, and by the time it reaches everybody, millions of people have seen it. It's free money. And we're actually talking about expressing information. They are suppressing information. If you watch
All right, so I know that could feel a little bleak, but there's lots of people who've gotten really good at doing what he is talking about, and it's really a matter of like training our groups and our organizations and changing our own mindsets to like adopt these tactics, not their models. I think, there's I think a difference. We do not want to just reheat the nachos of the right. What we want to do is make sure that we are countering strategically their misinformation machine, right? And I think that is that's the goal here. So what does that look like? And we're going to define some terms just to help people think about what he is saying when he's talking about this this cycle of information. So both we have these on our side and they have these on their side, and I hope these make sense. But they're probably terms we're going to use later. So an amplifier account is typically an account with a lot of followers that is sharing and recycling content. And what's really valuable about these accounts is they have a frame. They usually have a bit of a worldview to them, but they are not explicitly a person. It can be many people monitoring or managing these accounts, and they can exist on many social media platforms, and they recycle. And this helps with frequency. The Media Matters bubbles, that chart that we all kind of know at this point. A really important key in that is that the frequency of it was also really outpacing the left and what we were doing. So amplifiers are critical for those things. Properties, these are more run by nonprofits and they're actually really effective, but they're not going to feel as organic. Usually they're coming from a place where you're oh, this is paid for, run by someone. I know they're visual, I know what they do in the world. And amplifiers can kind of you don't always know. And this is that's the way you get into other spaces than just, hard Dem centers. Sorry, nonpartisan, hard left centers. Creators are folks who have that parasocial relationship. So they're the direct to cameras, people with big platforms who have followers, right? And I mean followers in that people trust them, they have that relationship built. Parasocial relationships are one-sided relationships online where you know them, you trust them for whatever reason, and they do not know you back. Culture platforms can be anything from Reswiftance, which was the Taylor Swift organizing group that popped up last year to have people be civically engaged around Taylor Swift content. And then there's Kerry Washington, who's an actual celebrity, but has her account managed by other people, is not necessarily a creator in that way, and probably doesn't have that quite same relationship to their audience because she's not monitoring the comments, things like that. And then online communities, which is my personal obsession and fascination, are things like subreddits, which is a part of Reddit, which is a forum and answering area, and then Facebook groups where people know your community and might actually be geographically based. And so I'm going a little fast just so I actually can get through everything. So this is our digital ecosystem. This is the best we've done to kind of landscape it. And we can go to the next, I believe. And I wanted to have an example of how those things, those different landscapes, how they play out in misinformation spreading. So I wanted to use the Texas floods as an example. I'm a Texan. It hit me really hard. My parents, my mom and sister are in Austin. So July 4th, that information, the floods happened. And you can kind of trace it over the next 3 days. There was a small account that got shared by a huge account, Mike Flynn's account. Marjorie Taylor Greene posted legislation around cloud seeding. And all of a sudden, the conversation shifted very, very quickly. In 24 hours, suddenly the conversation was no longer about Kristi Noem not getting funding to flood victims, but it was about whether or not cloud seeding is real and causing floods. So that period of time was really critical. And then what we saw were these amplifier accounts take that message, recycle it, and then suddenly it was a major conversation. Things like CBS were talking about cloud seeding, and all of the other things we should have been talking about in that moment were disappeared, right? And like we were kind of yelling into the void again, as stated in that Jesse Waters clip. Okay, so that's like the bad news. That's the stuff that's like tough to deal with, but we are fighting it. So let's like fast forward all the way to how we turn the tides. And I think, in the future, I think what it would look like for MVP and our allies to win would be a shift in mindset, not expecting a silver bullet strategy, because there isn't one. I don't know that even if we found the turning point of the left tomorrow, like, I don't, this is going to take work. It's going to take cross-organizational cooperation. It's going to take us, meaning we take a step back sometimes while we let others step forward. It's going to take a lot of cooperation that maybe doesn't exist as much as we would like it to right now. It means that the internet is a public sphere, right? We need to treat it not just as a place to buy ads, but organize and find the people that align with us and spread our message. So we need to treat it like organizing versus broadcasting. We need to practice insurgent tactics and, spread little funding opportunities here and there to test out what's working best, especially with like micro influencers and anti-establishment creators we may not have worked with before. Unifying our amplification networks between amplifiers and creators, and then measure, things not just in terms of clicks and views, while they are important, but in terms of how are we impacting a global, like a broader conversation? Are our messages breaking through? If we do something and then poll, like, did people see it and hear it, and like figuring that part out? Okay, next slide. I think we can achieve a new sphere of the public. We can expand that pie of people that we're talking to. So when we're knocking on a door, it doesn't feel like we are in this hostile territory. We can dominate the media landscape. We can figure out how to do the Texas flood messaging, but for our side. We can shift public opinion in a real way, and not just kind of constantly play the defensive with trans messaging, immigration messaging, things that we hold really dear, but are just kind of distorted and polluted online. And we can win progress that way. I think we can actually make a real difference while investing in our organizing methods and like bringing that to a broader sphere, the online sphere. So how do we do it? So I don't think everyone needs a podcast, but we do need more of them, and we need to invest in the ones that exist. Sorry, I just love this Onion headline like so much. And we need to build on what's worked. So MVP has invested already in this space, starting I think 2018. And we can go to the next slide. I'm gonna move a little fast through these, so I apologize. We have our VIP cohort, which works with Kerry Washington to increase our digital strategies across different states with our partners to make sure that they're really like using tactical strategies online. We can go to the next one. We also worked with TikTokers to talk about getting out the vote and engaging civically with their audience. We can go to the next slide. And then we've invested in like cultural spaces. We partnered with Way to Rise. American Experiment Project does incredible cultural work, Watering Hole Media, and Distill is a really interesting amplifier account out of Michigan who does a lot of civic engagement and networking within their broader ecosystem. Okay. So we do need to create what's still missing. That is real. And we believe that there are like 5 lenses that we can work with. Digital power for state organizing, partnering with organizations like Distill, youth movements, identity and culture organizing, digital voter engagement, civic engagement, and then amplification networks. So kind of quickly through these, state level is investing in things like amplifier accounts in Michigan and kind of expanding those throughout the state. Next. Youth movements. Gen Z for Change has been a partner for a couple of years. They're doing incredible work online with young people. Go to the next. Identity and culture organizing is just identifying the places where we can have an impact and not necessarily sell a worldview right off the bat, but we can kind of like merge it with what exists and people are consuming. And digital voter engagement, making sure people are civically engaged online, finding them where they are, persuading them just to get off the couch. And finally, amplification, just making sure those things are working together, because that is what the right does so much better than we do right now. This is our kind of vetting criteria. We want to make sure that we are investing in groups that are collaborative. We want to know that they're digital masters, like they actually speak the digital language and are design their content to go viral so that we can actually claim these wins and impact. And then, like I said, we want to win hearts and minds. We want to hack that algorithm and make sure people are, moving from that dark discourse and into ones where we can actually win in our conversations with them at the doors. And sorry, and I will be introducing with great pleasure Minister JaNaé Bates, who's a leader in the Narrative Justice League and Isaiah, and has an incredible presentation for us today.
Thank you, Rynn. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. Minister JaNaé Bates. You can just refer to me as JaNaé with Isaiah and Faith in Minnesota. And so I'm going to talk to you all about Narrative Justice League. So Billy mentioned earlier this notion of how they want to make sure that they're investing in people and in organizing and not necessarily like the TV ads, right? And so the beauty of Narrative Justice League is that you get to invest in the people who are expanding our possibilities and our capacities to be able to do really good work in new media. And we're doing it through organizing. So Narrative Justice League is a coalition of sorts, but it's really an alignment space. It's about 40 organizations in the state of Minnesota across issue cuts, and even across like size and range and frankly types of organizations. There are of course like organizing organizations. There's also advocacy orgs that are part of it. Some organizations are tiny, so like a staff of 2, and some organizations are really large. Like we have the largest labor union. Education Minnesota is a part of Narrative Justice League. But the thing that really makes it sing is that we all are committed to building a progressive narrative ecosystem in Minnesota. So you may have heard, and you've heard this thing already, I think Billy mentioned about the Minnesota Miracle, which frankly, as a minister, I am not a fan of the term Minnesota Miracle because I know what a miracle is. And I know I've been in Minnesota doing a lot of work. That is not how miracles happen. But one of the things that made the Minnesota Miracle actually come into be is that we really did put a lot of work across organizations across the state to have a real progressive narrative ecosystem. And so thank you. What makes the superpower of this particular configuration of organizations and people is that we get to have all of our different organizational issue cuts, all of our different priorities, they get to manifest together, and we get to create a similar songbook that we can all sing from, but it's going to sound different. So the next slide kind of is a representation of that. It creates the possibility for story alignment, even though it's going to look different coming from different folks. But that makes it possible for us to have what we call an echo chamber of narrative that's happening that actually allows people to be animated to their best self. So, for example, Narrative Justice League many years ago put a lot of work into, because we know, well, it's just a little bit of background, you all, some of you probably know this already. A lot of organizations will sometimes get funds and resources to do research, right? But have no idea how to do research. So then we end up subcontracting it to some consultant who will do the research for us. And then we get the research back and it's like, this is cool, but don't really know how to implement it or use it. And it goes in a drawer. We probably took like one question from it and we like, yay, this thing says the thing we wanted. And we talk about that or put it in a press release. But it actually doesn't help us expand our capacity, learn how to implement research, and frankly, even do it really well ourselves. And so in Narrative Justice League, we've made it possible so that we are actually, because we're the people talking to people every day, we literally have thousands upon thousands of people that we're in deep relationship and conversation with as our leaders. And so we can actually get the messages that they're using every day, that they're willing to repeat every day. And those are the things that we can go out and test, but we also have an eye toward how do we implement it, how do we use it, how do we put it in digital media, how do we put it in op-eds and LTEs, how do we get our own leaders to amplify it on their social media and build their own social clout, which is also garnering more and more people who get to hear it organically. So that's what Narrative Justice League makes possible. Next slide. And so what we do is we create this shared space that builds trust. In all states, I'm sure they all have different ecosystems of different organizations, some that partner closer together and some that don't. And the beauty of Narrative Justice League is that it is a space for comms people, for organizers, for policy folks, for EDs, for anyone that is trying to communicate from their organization's perspective, which is pretty much every staff member and leader of an organization. But we make room for them to get development. So let's click through the bullets of some of the things we offer. In Narrative Justice League, we have different partners host the space every week or every month. And so that allows for, just a general shared understanding of like we all get to contribute and we all get to benefit no matter how big or small your org is. We also pool our funds together, which creates a buy-in and a trust within the coalition. So unlike some more traditional communications hubs where the funding like sits with maybe one organization, or there's like an organization created that is basically wheeling and dealing the information out more as like spokes. We actually operate where we share our resources, we share infrastructure. Sometimes we even share staff, again, because we have different capacities of different organizations. And so philanthropy certainly helps all of our organizations to be able to do that, as well as our labor partners. And it really creates the ability for us to have very nimble and durable, a nimble and durable arm as an organization or as a coalition and alignment space. So yeah, it allows us to all benefit and all contribute. Next slide. So we have what we would consider a depth-based model, but it is built with an eye towards scale. So we're always thinking about the scale of the outcomes. And some of the ways that we ensure that that happens is by next bullet point. There we go. We have our monthly skill building gatherings, and those tend to be hard skills and soft skills. So folks come in and learn everything as basic as how do you have a press conference to how do we start to talk about this new issue cut that we've developed, and it actually moves the progressive narrative we need, but doesn't undermine another thing that a partner wants. It is, and then squads and labs that happen more frequently than the monthly gathering. So for example, this Friday, we're doing a statewide briefing that includes organizations across the state, as well as elected officials, where we're going to talk about how do we talk about the big Medicaid cuts that are happening and its implication on Minnesota. Yesterday, though, we had a happy hour where we got to talk together about the different narrative places where we've been stuck and what are the things that we can do moving forward. We have implemented race, class, gender narrative as an alignment space. And so that allows us to have a really nimble way in which we're able to talk about the things that we're trying to amplify across the state. And race, class, gender narrative is really, for some, they consider it like it's a messaging guidance, which it is in a lot of ways, but it's also a political analysis in how you can make sure that the people that we're not just messaging to, but the messengers themselves are clear that they are not just going to get handed a bunch of talking points and just regurgitating the things we tell them to say, but actually honoring that we all are experts of our own experience. And really, it's a framework in how we can talk to help to shape the worldview of the listeners. And so we've had over 800 of our leaders trained in race, class, gender narrative. And as Narrative Justice League, we have a real commitment toward both the individual and the institutional narrative development. So folks as individuals who come into the space get to be developed, but it is for also the benefit of the institution and organization that they're a part of. And and then yes, we have 40 organizations and growing statewide that are a part of this team of folks. Next slide. Yay. I think I did good on time.
You did so good. You are crushing it. Thank you so much, JaNaé. An honor to have you here. I love this model and can't wait to test it out in other places. And it is my other great honor to introduce Jen Ancona, who is just such a leader in the space, is with Way to Rise, vice president and co-founder. Yeah, welcome, Jen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rynn and JaNaé. That was great. And thanks everyone for being here. It's really great to be here. I'm representing Way to Rise, which is the nonpartisan fund of Way to Win, where I also am the co-founder and vice president. So just always wonderful to be back with the MVP fam. So I am going to give a little bit of background and then dive into a specific example and a way that we worked with MVP this past year and some work we're doing to build narrative online. So the first thing I just want to talk about is that we do talk a lot about the rights dominance in the media ecosystem and the channels they have and the people they have repeating these messages, but there is an imbalance around how they use it as well. And I see this in the form of the right uses their media ecosystem to drive a clear story. It's always a really big story that they're telling. And then there's a little bit of policy sprinkled in there, you know, just for good measure. But on the left, we have tended to organize everything around policy. We're always talking about policy, we're talking about issues, we're talking about specific policy things we want to do, and we're not actually telling a bigger story that helps people understand the world, that helps people understand, you know, why things are hard for them, who's to blame. The right is giving them that story and we aren't, and that is one of the biggest things we need to actually do when we are building a bigger media ecosystem, is making sure that we're not just building a bunch of channels, but that we're making sure that we're building it to drive a clear story and worldview forward. That's the purpose. And that's one of the things that we at Way to Win have been driving on and in the evolution of our narrative work, which we've been doing over the past 7 years. Since 2018, when we first launched Way to Win, we've had narrative shift work and digital storytelling in our theory of change. And we've really been iterating and learning and fine-tuning this model over the years. So just a couple of things, highlights I want to say. You know, it was really coming out of the pandemic when, you know, everything really changed in terms of what we could do on the ground. And we started to see people go really into a deep holes around getting all their information from the internet, being isolated. And we were getting feedback from a lot of the state partners. We've continued to get feedback from a lot of state partners that we work with at Way to Win across the Sunbelt states, especially where we focus, that they're just drowning in a sea of these national narratives. They're trying to organize door to door and talk to people, but the second they go away from the door, people are getting sucked into these different podcasts or, you know, rabbit holes that are essentially making it harder for them to do their own grassroots organizing work. So it's been a really important thing for us over the whole time that we've been doing this to understand that dynamic and to figure out how can we actually help the organizers on the ground be swimming in a different sea of narratives that actually could help the work they're doing and support that. One of the things I just think is fun is that in kind of doing a lot of this organizing work with people across the movement, we did a big event in 2021 in the middle of the pandemic. It was an online event, and it was really about this idea of marrying media and movement and you know, research and organizing. And one of our keynote speakers was JaNaé Bates. And so it's just amazing to be back together here with JaNaé and all the amazing work they're doing. The other piece is that, you know, all of this kind of built to 2023 and 2024 when Way to Win with several other partners, ASO Communications, We Make the Future, Gutsy Media, we launched and ran a $20 million program that was called Amplify. And it included a lot of this work in the social media content creator space, which we'll talk about, and marrying grassroots organizing with smart digital content. That idea, we've been seeing out there in some things like Mamdani, where a social media strategy, but overlaid over a really strong organizing strategy. And that's what we were able to test in 2024. And we have some pretty incredible results that we're going to be able to share with all of you in the community in the coming month. That shows it was incredibly an incredibly effective strategy. And that's something that we absolutely need to keep leaning in on. So if you go to the next slide, what Way to Win did in the last cycle was we focused a lot on short form video and content creators on TikTok. And partially was because number one, it's the next frontier of media and organizing. These content creators are, just human beings who have our values and who have the ability to speak and build audiences who trust and listen to them. Like Rynn said, these parasocial relationships. It is a form of organizing, honestly. And so also, as someone who came from being a journalist, I was also on the front lines of becoming a blogger in the early days of the internet. It's so much more diverse and so much more democratized than any other kind of media innovation that I've seen in all my time in the space. And so we do think it's exciting and kind of one of the things we need to keep working on. So we focused there, and we were really pioneers. We put a serious level investment in the space. This slide just shows kind of like all the different partners we funded, we seeded, we helped pull together all the different layers, whether they were funders or organizations running program or agencies and companies. And we took this ecosystem approach where honestly, this space can be very competitive, and we were able to get a lot of the players coming to the same place, coming around these same message frames that we knew were working around, like our freedoms, our future, Project 2025, etc. And this was a really innovative way of tackling this, and it worked. It really showed from our view that we could scale this work because all of the content that we created in this ecosystem approach reached almost 1 billion views and was highly impactful because it was being driven by message frames that were already tested and that we knew would work with people who were kind of disaffected, and we needed to help them get excited and get off the couch. And so the beauty of this approach is also that that's okay, you can go. The beauty of this approach was that we built an amazing team led by the brilliant Glennis, who we'll hear from in the Q&A. And so when the election was over, we had this infrastructure intact, and we have all these really good relationships with creators and influencers in the space that allowed us to keep going, even though it was a tough moment. So we helped creators navigate the difficult post-election period, and we were already moving resources and getting people engaged in early January. And so that was really when we connected. Billy and I have been talking a lot post-election about what we had learned in media and what we could help with around MVP's work. And we started going deep on this idea of how could we test out, moving narratives through this space and kind of building new channels that could be helpful for this particular how we meet the moment around this slide into autocracy that we're all facing. And so the idea was that the vibes were bad on the internet. People were also fighting with each other everywhere. And so we just felt like we needed something to help people latch onto that would, in this moment, make them want to keep going. The creators themselves, but also just Americans, people out there, kind of a way to give hope. So this idea, this 3.5% rule, which many of you have probably heard now by Erica Chenoweth, a Harvard professor, that all this research around the world that has shown when you're facing an autocratic regime, if 3.5% of that population is organized and sustain resistance, then change becomes almost inevitable. And so this idea really catches fire for people because it gives them hope in a time when we do not have a lot of hope. And it also isn't tied to an organization. It's not partisan. There's a very low barrier of entry in how we've created this. So we can go to the next slide. So we've activated 60 plus creators across the ecosystem with a combined reach of 70 million people, we launched this new channel, 3.5%. That was not a thing that existed before on Instagram. And because we were partnering with creators who were excited about it, and the content that we were putting out is actually good, entertaining, is tapping into something that is happening culturally, we've been growing that page from 0 to almost like 70,000. Every time I come back and talk about this, it's bigger than what's on the slide. And our goal is actually to grow it to eventually to 8 million, which is literally 3.5% of America, in terms of this rule. And so with that big goal, kind of thinking ahead, not only 26 and 2028, this could become a channel to actually activate people around resistance actions, not just the protests, which we've been activating people around. We did a lot around No Kings protest, but other kinds of resistance actions, withholding work, whether it's like other kinds of non-compliance that a lot of folks have been working on. And so we're just excited that it is catching on and it is growing really organically, and then that we help do that with this new model. So I'll talk through the model a little bit. First is we have anchor creators, and these are people who have big platforms across all the different things: Substack, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and we're inspiring them to become part of this and create content that pulls people in. And maybe we can just play this quick clip from this is a culture comedy creator who did this podcast with us.
We are finding that with 3.5% of people backing behind it, that legitimate change is coming from it. To me, that has been a huge beacon of hope, because girl, a lot of stuff feels helpless. But there is something to be said about having a passion and sticking with it, and there is something to be said about trusting the process. Girl, Rome was not built in a day, and certainly change will not happen overnight. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth trying. 3.5%, look it up, literally is going to blow your mind.
So these creators are actually sending their audiences and saying, go follow this page. This is something you can do right now. And it really has worked. If we go to the next slide, we've also created this amplifier group of 40 different creators. There's a signal chat that you can see here where they share, this is popping, and they actually choose how they're going to amplify this. It's interesting because you'll hear a lot about amplifiers. A lot of people are talking about AI amplification, which is definitely a thing, but it's interesting that this was a people-oriented organizing approach. And it is so powerful because people are smart and powerful, much more than a computer. And so you can see like what you will be able to accomplish with this kind of thing. And it was pretty low lift. And actually most of the views we've gotten 30 million views across all of this content that we've created. And most of that has been coming from the amplifiers who have been finding ways to make this organically spread. And so we feel like this is a really good model for other things that we want to spread out there. At least we're still kind of building it with this pilot. So the next slide, just a little bit more about the content, knowing that, like I said, different platforms, but we're also doing, regular face-to-camera verticals, what we call meme dumps, which you'll see in the middle, which is like, it's got a cool song that people are into. You can scroll through and you kind of get a sense for what's happening. So the audience that's listening to 3.5 is actually getting educated about what's going on. They're getting the news about the bad guys and the villains who are the ones we need to blame. They're getting actually a story about that, and they're getting an inspiring story around how they can be a part of it. And there's always that sense of like, don't forget, like, you can take action. You are part of this movement. So that inspiring agency in people that can have a lot of apathy and want to shut down. And so that's just another beauty of this strategy. The next slide, I believe, is just kind of what we want to do next. This has been really successful. And again, just so thankful for MVP for the partnership and helping build this. We want to do more creator contracts. We want to get things kicked off more for phase 2 this month, and broaden the pool to include a lot more culture, lifestyle, fashion creators and messengers. And then we want to coordinate with movement leaders across the board to mobilize audiences through different actions. So what are CTAs that different groups have, calls to action that different groups have? How can we partner with them once we have this channel growing? I mean, we expect to make 100,000 followers by the end of August, and it'll continue to grow. So as it gets bigger, how do we partner with people to actually move through a particular action? And we're really excited about that. And then the final thing is the 3.5% tour, which builds off of a creator tour that we did in 2024 that we executed with 112 creators. We brought them to battleground states. We trained them on message frames. We helped them produce this platform optimized content that reached over 760 million views across all the platforms. And so there is something about the marrying of people in a place and their online platforms. And that's something that we would really like to do with creators on the road around what's happening, how are people being hit hard by this particular regime, and that this would be a kind of a new content series that can help continue to grow the page and mobilize folks into the fight to come. We just have about 1.5 million on the C3 side we're trying to raise for this, and a $600,000 gap on the C4 side. So with that, I just want to say thank you again to Rynn and Billy and the whole team, and we look forward to chatting in the Q&A later.
Thank you both so much. Just such an honor to be with folks who have been piloting this for so long and who have really shown like mastery and of digital language and investment. And we're just learning a lot as we go, and look forward to new investment strategies and also doubling down on ones that are working. So that, means that we have to kind of figure out what the next steps are, and also what our investment strategies are. So we can go to the next slide. So at the end of the week, or I guess starting next week, we do have our new media strategy from MVP, which will really cover our thinking behind this stuff, some of the lenses, and a little bit deeper dive into everything that we are focusing on. We'll have a donor docket that will have our top line recommendations, as well as some referrals, and just making sure that our partners and donors really understand how we're seeing the space, and who we think like are really good people to invest in, who are seeing this with a long-term vision, and not just in kind of a cyclical boom and bust way. And if you would like, you can move money to MVP if you're inspired to. If you would like to give up to 10K online, you contribute that way. If you would like to give over 10K, you can talk to one of our donor advisors. But I do want to frame this in, I want to give some good and bad news, right? I think what is great about digital is that, so the good news is that very small investments can be great test runs, right? Like, we do not need $100 million to test something out. There are scales of $500 projects that can kind of prove a case, prove a thesis that we can expand on, or up to 10,000, like 50,000, that can really give us a lot of insight and that haven't maybe been tested before. And the bad news is that we are really outspent on the other side. It's like a 10-to-1 spend right now. There are organizations that have proven some of that work, and if that is where you want to move everything, that is excellent. That is where things need to go as well. But I think there's these two sides of investment that both need to happen kind of simultaneously. They are ahead of us in a lot of ways, but and it's growing. But I believe that our message is stronger, right? I believe ultimately that fascism is a tough pill to swallow. People want clean air and housing and their families to be safe, and they do not want a world where, neighbors are fighting neighbors and we are constantly worried about prices and the world falling apart. We want stability for future generations, and I think these layered investments will get us there. And I think we have an easier fight in that regard. So just so appreciative for all of you and our speakers and everyone joining us. We're going to launch our Q&A, I believe, and I'll kick it over to Zoe, our communications director, who will be leading the panel Q&A session.
Hey everyone, Oh my, thank you all so much for being here. I want to thank our speakers again. And we are going to be entering optional 30-minute Q&A in a moment. So for right now, I'm going to officially close the official call. So feel free to drop off if you need to. Stay for the next 30 minutes if you'd like to be part of the Q&A. And we are going to have Billy and Rynn from MVP, JaNaé from Isaiah and Faith in Minnesota, and Jen and Glennis from Way to Rise. And I'm going to facilitate, but I'm just going to be taking questions from the Q&A. You can share more in the chat. We're going to re-enable the chat as well. And think of this as like a live, real-time podcast that you're just sitting in on and feeding questions into. So Rynn, JaNaé, Glennis, Jen, and soon to be Billy, welcome to the show. Welcome to the pod. Thank you all so much for everything you shared. And I think what I want to do to kick us off is just turn it to Billy for any kind of initial reactions on what you've heard, what's going through your mind right now, Billy, hearing from all the presenters and thinking about what's ahead. And just a reminder, this to everybody on the call, this is a nonpartisan briefing and a nonpartisan Q&A. So Billy, over to you.
I mean, I just have a gigantic Kool-Aid smile on my face just listening to you all because like I don't have anything to add. You all are so smart. I'm so glad that we're in partnership with you all and that you're leading the way in us figuring this out. I think a question I might pose to just filibuster while we get in more questions is, what are you obsessed with right now? What's keeping you up at night? Where's your brain in terms of this moment, how we're meeting this moment, how we're not meeting this moment, that if we had more money, we'd be doing these things. How are you guys thinking about that? Jump on in. And also, welcome Glennis, who you guys haven't heard from yet, who's like, yeah, so brilliant.
I'm happy to start then, if that's
Yeah, go ahead, Glennis.
what's keeping me up at night. I want to be honest with everyone. I'm not losing that much sleep in that I do feel like we have so much opportunity and there is a lot of investment happening in the space right now, which is incredibly valuable. And we do have smart minds and we do have an amazing, amazing community and ecosystem of creators and influencers who are ready to tap in and talk about all of the things that are happening and to bring more people into the fold. So I'll start off with the optimistic tone of I'm not losing that much sleep. I feel like we're on the right path and we have so much opportunity, and that we as a movement don't have much power politically. So we can do as much as we want and really run with it.
All right, Glennis, I appreciate the optimism in that response. I mean, I would say this piece that you named about us not having enough power politically, I am constantly thinking about that. How do we acquire more power? And literally just power in the ability to act. And so many people, so many communities have felt shut out. And but the thing that actually, it's both the thing that keeps me up at night, but also gets me up in the morning, is how are we constantly pushing to connect to this like large swath of folks who have felt disconnected from the political arena, like which is like the majority of people. And then so it's like, how are we connecting with like working class folks, with folks who consider themselves like apolitical, people who are just like, if I vote at all, it's to make sure I have money in my pocket, right? It's like those folks who may or may not be thinking I made a bad choice. And so in November. And so like I am like constantly thinking about how are we like tapping into the values of those folks, getting them excited about what's possible, not just fighting off bad things. And like bringing them into something bigger than all of us. And so that is a constant thing that I'm actively working on.
JaNaé, quick follow-up on that. I know we on the MVP team know, but I want all of our donors to know. There's so much that y'all have been able to do in Minnesota to organized power, including narrative power, to shape the public policy conversation in Minnesota and turn that into actual policy wins. Could you just give like a, a short window into what you've done and how you did it?
Yeah. I mean, so we're a part of creating a lot of spaces that are about how do we do this thing? Like how are we making sure that more and more people have both the messaging, but also the like um, concrete actions that they can take. Frankly, we know that right now, with all the things going on in the world, our biggest opposition is not who we tend to think is opposition. It's our own cynicism. It's that we know that like there's so many good, right, just things, and we believe they're right and good and just, but we also don't think they're possible. And so because we don't think they're possible, we're less likely to take action to do something about it. And so what we've been doing at Isaiah, we've created, we're like the anchor for a much larger coalition called Lighthouse. It started as clergy, but frankly, it's like a come one, come all, but it's people across faith, across race, across geography, and across partisanship who are coming together and saying, we have a big, broad no. It really is actually pushing for this like 3.5% that is named, where we know that we actually need like skirmishes happening. So like these small fights and battles happening all across the state, where we're challenging this notion of like everything is just team red or team blue. And it's actually like team us. What does it mean to fight against like the very massive civil rights violations that we're seeing? And also to also push back on these massive cuts that have big implications for our schools, for our healthcare, for our hospitals. And we're finding that that is especially true in places like rural Minnesota and in places where people have lower income. And most certainly that does not share a partisan nature. And so we have been able to create the kind of like narrative possibilities so that folks are clear about what's the framework of actual words that we're using, what's the like instruments, the channels we're using, what ways are we using leveraging social media and new media to amplify these things, and having like bodies in places like people showing up to their city council meetings, people going to their county commissioner meetings, and actually getting their electeds to say, oh no, we're going to stand up against this, regardless of where they are on like the political spectrum.
Yeah, I'll just add, I totally agree with both Glennis and JaNaé. It's like something about we are in an authoritarian regime and we are seeing what they are doing. And so, how do we make sure people get activated enough and start paying attention enough before it's too late? And like that is what we have learned from our friends and neighbors across the world who have gone through this, where they literally say, I wish people would have taken this seriously sooner. And I feel like that's what keeps me up at night. Like, how do we not like this business as usual, politics as usual? How do we actually get people to understand this has to be a really dramatic shift that we're going to be in to come together and to fight what is actually happening, and to get people activated?
Can I speak to what keeps me up at night?
Yeah, please.
Say like so AI keeps me up at night. I'll be like, that's what keeps me up at night. But on the positive side, I think what is so exciting about new media space, and how we've been using it, especially lately, is that I don't know if you actually know this, Billy, but I was Gamaliel trained. So like that's my whole power. I'm obsessed with power, and that is my worldview. And what I've seen be really effective is when we're able to take that issue cut, right? When we're able to distill everything down and engage people, I've seen really powerful organizing of the inside outside strategy that I think was really hard before, when people didn't feel the pressure from the outside. Like politicians are weirdly responsive to um, online space. It makes kind of this bubble around them, and there's like a panic that's built up. And I think we have been using it so much more strategically in like roughly the last year to boil down and distill the message, have messages that can go viral. Because I actually disagree that it's only right-wing content that goes viral. I think there are lots of things that once like you can boil it down and kind of tap into a cultural common sense and not approach people with a preconception of what they believe and understand, you just make the case to them kind of and build it from the ground up, which is like really what the right wing does very well. That is like shown to be really effective, right? And we've kind of started to adopt this this posture. And I think I'm just seeing some of the comments in the chat. I'm hoping I can kind of get to that like I don't think it takes right-wing narratives to go viral. I have seen, and we have seen, especially recently, I can't like talk about what that is, but like we've seen those things succeed online. And it's really just a matter of tapping into that sort of narrative distillation and partnering across the board to amplify those messages.
Yeah, well said. I'm gonna piggyback on that. I'm gonna ask Gary Hirsch's question and just see what y'all have to say about this. How can we mobilize groups that have been traditionally part of the conservative coalition but are now being hurt by the government's actions, veteran organizations, farm organizations, et cetera? How do we get them to join us? And feel free to share any examples, stories of where you've seen this work.
Yeah, I'm happy to start again here with 3.5% campaign and what we're trying to build online. When we first sat down and looked at the paper, which I saw another question saying like, how seriously should we take the paper itself? And zooming out, we saw that as digital organizers and saw it really as a vibe and a brand container to be able to bring in people to the resistance. And that includes people who may have voted in a certain way and may see that the administration's policies are not, in fact, protecting them or helping them in any way. And I think a lot of that work does happen online, whether it's our creators or our programs that we're running, effectively communicating to people who may not have voted the way we wanted them to, that they do have a home with us and that the tent door is not closed. It is in fact very open, and that requires sustained communication online so that people are, scrolling and seeing, okay, I do have a home here, should I want it? And I will say the right is very, very effective at that message specifically, but in the reverse. So someone on the left who may have decided, you know what, this doesn't work for me, I want to come to the right. And they have had numerous viral videos, both on YouTube and on other platforms, saying that they as a movement should in fact be accepting them. So it's something that we definitely should be doing and that we are doing. And I think the 3.5% program that we're running online is a great example of that.
Thanks. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Okay. Yeah, Rynn, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a little bit about, I think Jonathan Meagher has this great presentation where he talks about, how we approach people. And when we think about content creators and working with folks who kind of present in a certain way, like that is like the way that we can get through to other people, or we can, I think that is how we get through, right? There are organizations sort of focused on this and like organizing veterans to be the spokespeople for these issues. And I think like there are lots of ways in. I think a lot of them are digital. I actually think like organizing just door to door or just in community can be really tough. There's just such a distrust. But I have seen it be really effective when there are creators who represent a certain group of people who don't have to they're not given talking points. They're allowed to speak with their authentic voice, move people from one side to the other. I also think there's some like tactics worth investing in where we can wedge the right, or we can wedge issues. And I think those are worth exploring and can feel a little like different and outside of our realm of investments, but I think they're like worth talking about.
And I also think it's good to remember something that Rynn lifted up earlier in your presentation about the fact that we actually have really good ideas, and that those are actually quite popular. So remembering that narratively, the right tends to have a much easier job because their job is to just make you afraid and say, run, fire, things are bad. And we have the other job of constructing hope for people and saying, no, we should stay and work together and figure it out. But I think the thing that I just love to stay grounded in as I get to do narrative work is remembering that, and the word has shifted over time. Some people use the word persuadables, some people say conflicted, but the reality is that is where the majority of people are. They are holding two ideologies at the same time. And the things that are going to move them is a consistent message that is bold and is said repeatedly. Like if you have something that is compelling, exciting, say it with your chest over and over again. And I think sometimes we get into a place where we actually lose our consistency because we're just like trying to catch the next shiny thing. Or we don't feel confident in that people want things like paid family medical leave for everyone. When the records have shown time and time again, over 80% of Americans want that. So like there's just like a reality that we have to remember that people are conflicted. And it is because we have a dominant narrative that tells them that all the things that you think are good and just and wonderful, they're not possible. And so you should be afraid of people who want them and just go into small individual self. And we have to be the ones to say, actually, they are possible when we work together. And we know we have like time tested, battle proven that actually our messages, when we do say them consistently and boldly and over again, they actually beat oppositional message every time. I think we just need the confidence to do it and lean in.
Yeah, I want to hear from Glennis, Jen, Rynn on this too, and then want to hear examples of what are some of those messages that we've seen work, how that's tied into any policy wins or shifts in public opinion. But yeah, let's keep it going. Let's keep it popping. Glennis, you looked like you were leaning in, like you were about to say something.
No, I was just listening very intently.
Okay,
Would
just
you
that
mind
kind of
just
leaning.
re-upping the question?
Yes, what question are we asking? Yeah, so we're talking about how do we it's like we're trying to tackle a bunch of questions at once, but there's been a lot of questions about the right uses misinformation and fear so powerfully, so effectively. How do we counter that without falling into those same
Yeah.
immoral, unethical traps? And then what are examples of where we've seen it actually work and have policy impact or impact on real people's lives?
Yeah, I can speak more to the first part of that question, and then maybe I'll popcorn it off to Rynn or Jen for the latter. But we definitely work, with trusted messengers, so people who are, anchored in facts and not fiction. The, Courier Newsroom, I think, is a great example of an organization that has been pumping out a ton of content. And something I also want to do just to zoom out on this conversation writ large is a lot of what we're talking about, of course, is Gen Z and millennials of where they get their news and information. And we know that the majority of Gen Z and millennials get their information online. We also know that the average screen time of Gen Z and millennials is anywhere from 7 to 10 hours a day. So when you look at the misinformation and disinformation, we know that if we're not meeting them there with our trusted voices and messengers, someone else is. I think, Rynn, you talked about this earlier on in the presentation. So really what we need to do is invest in more organizations that are putting out messaging that we know works and are meeting people where they are, and then also additional creators and influencers who are working with us on the narrative, et cetera. Because if we're able to meet more people online, we are able to effectively persuade them and bring them into our tent.
Yeah, love that. I mean, it's just what JaNaé said about the structure of the narrative around like bringing people in with values, really being clear to them about what is happening. People don't really understand the why behind what is happening. And if we don't narrate that for them, it's easy for them to believe the other side's why, right? And so I think that we have seen that exact kind of structure work to move people who are being pummeled with misinformation and disinformation constantly. Like in the Latino community in particular, we saw this happen over the course of the last couple of years in the Sunbelt states that we work in, Arizona and Nevada. But we have seen like specific campaigns that we've run. I mean, we haven't gotten there yet. There's like a lot more work to do. And obviously investing in Latino persuasion is absolutely critical for the future. And so I recommend that. And that's one of the things we're working on. But we actually have seen like when we use this kind of approach around like narrating what's going on and pulling people into a vision they can believe in, and then telling them how they themselves can take action, that we can move them from, I don't support you to I do support you. And with enough investment in that kind of approach, we can actually get more success in the places where we need to move, not like a kind of a marginal number of people, to kind of come like off the couch and stop being so disengaged and kind of cynical about the system, and then become part of our coalition. So that's where I have seen it really work.
Um, and I want to speak to just a little bit of my research and maybe even make a very bold claim that I don't think it's just that misinformation goes viral, but that, and forgive me, I was a philosophy and politics major, so if this is like hard to follow, I'm going to try to make it like as clear as possible. But I think what the right does really well is they practice inductive logic and reasoning. And by that, I mean, they will say something like, COVID vaccines don't work, or I didn't get sick, I got a COVID vaccine, therefore COVID vaccines don't work. And this is like a very simple three-part narrative that you can like engage with, right? And what we have to counter that with, or what we typically counter with, is a deductive reasoning, which is like, we trust science and we will get the vaccines because we want to protect people. We kind of start with this like top level principle. And unfortunately, like deductive reasoning does not work online. It truly is like you are assuming so much about a person that you're interacting with when you do that. So what I think we broadly like need to look at, and what really does well online, is kind of practicing this very logical set of reasoning in our messages, and that to me has been messaging that works really well, and you can see that with recent campaigns that have run that I can't talk about, but like you can see how those things sort of work. Is this like very logical step ladder that they build, and it works really well online. And I think we need to like rethink some of our framing and not assume where people are at, so our messages get to them better.
Oh, I love that. JaNaé, I want to turn it to you for any examples on messaging that take this positive outlook and truthful approach, and any specifics around policy issues in Minnesota where it's led to a win or shifted the conversation. I know you all have done so much.
Yeah, lots of examples. I'll think of one that like went pretty viral for Minnesota, you know. Um and it was right after right after the murder of George Floyd. There was a Republican legislator, actually he was our Republican leadership at the time in the Senate, who made the comment to press and publicly online that Governor Walz needed to apologize to the moms in the suburbs for what was happening with the uprising in the cities. And so we all heard that as a dog whistle, right? Like moms in suburbs, what do moms in suburbs look like? Um, and so instead of doing like the very what Rynn is naming like the actually we know that when you're talking about, we didn't do that. We just literally had moms. We activated a bunch of moms across the state who live in suburbs and who look is a variety of people say, actually, the apology we want is that we are allowing our state office, our state officers to like literally lynch someone in the middle of the street. Like, what are we doing about that? Or like, there's just like all these moms. Like, I'm a mom and I heard George Floyd cry out for his mom. Like, I think all moms care about that. Like, it was just like this resounding, I'm a suburban mom. And so that became a big thing on what was then called Twitter. And it was like this huge hashtag of I'm a suburban mom that ended up really going viral and had a New York Times article. But the beauty of it was really calling out this dog whistle. I know like one like simpler example is that we have really, really tried hard in Minnesota, and we try to do it at every chance we get, is like sometimes when we know that there's a horrific term that is used for our undocumented neighbors. That is they're called illegals, right? And so a pushback tends to be no human being is illegal. And we know that that actually is staying in an oppositional framework because now you are having a conversation about the legality and criminality of a human being and not grounded in your actual values and what you care about. And so we really push to make sure that we're always naming at all times, like every human being is deserving of dignity and of agency. And so it is like this forward framing of what are we actually saying about human beings, and that our counter to people who say horrendous things is actually saying what we're for, what we believe, what we know is true, and not just no they're not. And that is also another way in order to create narratives and messaging, frankly, that allows us to say the things we want and need and garner more and more people who believe that.
Awesome. Thanks. That's great. Want to follow up. This is for everybody. We've had a few questions about, I'm a donor. I want to give money to where I know there's going to be a return on investment. We've got to make this money go far, and that can sometimes take us into a short-term mindset when everything that we know the right has done well is fund this kind of work long-term, building entire new media infrastructure juggernauts. How do you think about and practice measuring the impact of this work in the day-to-day, month-to-month? How do you know when what you're doing is working? And what do you want to say to donors about the best ways to think about that?
That's the million-dollar question of what does the success look like for these programs and campaigns? And there's a couple of ways to look at it. One, the way when I talk to some folks about how to look at social media, it's like a TV that's always on, and it's just you're not controlling what channel you're seeing. Someone else is controlling it for you if you follow it or not. So if you're following an account on Instagram, you're probably going to see that material. On TikTok, it's really up to the algorithmic gods, which are not real, but in my head they are. So what you're really looking for in terms of success for these programs are shots on goal and views, right? If you put a piece of content out that has a message that sticks, and we see that 20 million people have viewed it, okay, we have to take that as a win. Also, when you look at 3.5%, when we launched that program, a goal of ours is for actual follower counts on that account because we can count those people as part of the movement. So I think at the lowest level, when you're thinking about digital media, really try and frame it as television that is on, and we want to put our channel in front of as many people as possible. So take away the Fox News and put in the MSNBC or the CNN, and you do that through views. So that's kind of one way to look at it.
Bless, I love that example. That's great. I would agree. Most certainly, one of the metrics that we use in organizing, and most certainly this includes on digitally, is our message being repeated? We are like we're creating again this consistent and persistent message. Are we actually seeing those same framework, the same messaging popping up in other places where we haven't touched, or at least like we haven't directly? Maybe a leader of ours now has some other concentric circle of folks who are also saying these messages over and over online. We've seen those shifts happen in traditional media and also in social. So we're like constantly doing that analysis. Is the message actually being repeated?
That's great. And I would just say two things. One is there's a lot we can do on the front end before we distribute these messages to understand that they're actually effective. We can test them with RCTs, randomized control trials. We can test them in focus groups so we understand and we listen to all the voters through the research. So we understand what we're saying is effective. So when we distribute it out, we know we're distributing an effective message. We also did this study that we're going to release where we literally have proven that overlaying organizing with effective messaging like this actually does move up to 4% of people in places. And so that's just you can do those kinds of evaluations when you build these overlaid programs with organizing and media together.
Thanks. Rynn, anything you want to add on this metrics question?
I don't know if there's much I can add. I am like obsess with this stuff. I think it's really interesting. I guess the only thing I might say is that like there's a lot of tech that's interested in tracking from like social media spaces to search engines and like searching and how that interacts with people's persuasion. So I'm following it closely. It's currently very expensive, but it's really interesting development in the research and how we're able to see, okay, this message got a lot of engagement. It's spreading in XYZ places. Did people feel compelled to like take the next step and do their own research? I think that'll tell us a lot about how people engage with our content and what moves them.
Awesome. All right. So here we are. We're about to close out. We're going to do a short round, popcorn round of closing thoughts. Want to ask, what's one thing you want to leave donors with from this conversation that they, take forward and be a part of how they see this work? So we'll just popcorn that, and then I'll turn it to Billy to officially close us out.
Okay, I'll start again. It's just the theme. I want to say, because there's a question in the chat that I answered, but someone who's a little bit older and not on social media. So what I will say is, even if you're not on social media, you can still engage in your community. You can talk about how you've seen digital media trends change or media writ large change and talk about your experience. And I will say, digital media is always there for you. So if you decide that you do, in fact, want to start a Facebook page or get an Instagram or a TikTok or any of those things, it is there and easy to set up. And if you want to explore the world that is digital, feel free to do so.
I mean, for me, it's just really simple. I hope people take away that there's a lot of promise and potential in this space, and there's like such a need to jump in and just do more is more. There's like no bad ideas. Like we need to throw everything out there. This is like something I don't usually agree with Billy on, but I actually do agree when it comes to this space. So I just really encourage people to know that this is something we can tackle and it's within our power.
And I just want to leave that like the online to offline space is so fluid. I know we talk about like what can we do to bring people in person, but really like there can be a lot of digital organizing. I have people that I've organized online with for like 5 years I've never met in person, and I have people I talk to every day that I really don't talk to online. And so I think there's a lot of promise in both, and we just need to shore up one side of it. So don't think this is a zero-sum game. We got a lot to learn in this space, but we also have a lot of good tactics on the ground that we can translate to it. So I feel very hopeful and confident.
Thank you, Rynn. All right, JaNaé and then Billy.
Yeah, I'm just tripling down on the convergence of media and how it's the online and offline is real, and like the intersections that happen even across issue cuts, across different types of organizations, and people who do different things and function in different ways. There are so many really fun and interesting ways that we can make sure that good narrative is getting out in the world by leveraging all these different types of experts.
I love this. And, I've been kind of like taking this in, both the specifics and just kind of trying to take a step back and think about this field. And one of the things that's really stuck with me is, you guys know who Charlie Kirk is, the person who built Turning Point USA. He had a goal to move 1% of young Americans from liberal to conservative each year. That was kind of like a big, hairy, audacious, long-term worldview shift. And he and Prager USA and that crew has done it. They have succeeded at their like really big long-term moonshot goal. And they did it in partnership with a bunch of big donors and small donors who were like, they on the right, they're like, we're afraid of the left. We are going to make a really big worldview shift. We're losing young people. They're kind of having a moment like we're having now. And, you know, they thought about it as like, our future is on the line. The future of the world is on the line. And we have to think about it like that. We have to think about it in like really big terms. We have to fight the immediate fights right now. And we have to have a really big vision for transforming the culture. And when I think about the early days of starting MVP back in 2016, and there was this field out there of like all these local great organizations out there. And, Faith in Minnesota was there and, hundreds of other organizations like it. But there wasn't like a really simple way for people to fund the movement. It was a little bit like how we see the internet. Like there's so much going on. How do we boil the ocean? How do we even vet what's what in the organizing space? And as I'm listening to you, I'm I've always had this dream of like, what if we could get twice as much money to the organizing sector? Like imagine how much better it would be. And I'm developing like a kind of parallel dream, which is like, what if we move as much or more, ideally twice as much to the organizing sector, and we treat this online space as like a twin organizing sector that we have to invest in as just as intense a way. I was making a joke with Rynn, like, Rynn, you're Roger Ailes. Think like Roger Ailes. Where's the talent? Who are, and you're all Roger Ailes. And by the way, I don't think I said this explicitly enough. You can move money through MVP. You can move money through Way to Win, who are incredibly Way to Win, Way to Rise, who are incredible at this. So we are just as happy with you moving money through any vehicle that whatever vehicle you most believe in, whoever you most want to partner with, or you can move it through multiple. Make big plans, talk to your accountant, look at your year, 2-year, 5-year, 10-year plans. This is the time. Authoritarianism had a breakthrough. It's consolidating. We're going to look back on this period and be like, what did we do? We have to make really big, ambitious, bold, hopeful plans right now to respond in this moment and to shift the culture. Because as Rynn said, they're ahead of us, but fundamentally what we're selling is better. We are selling better lives for all of us, and what JaNaé has built so brilliantly and all her colleagues have built so brilliantly in Minnesota, we can support on the organizing side. We're working with her colleague Doran to work with people in other states to build this deep organizing model. How do we improve organizing? And we want to do the same thing with creators, online strategy, digital strategy in parallel. And we're in this moment, like you will think back to this. We're in this moment of total adversity, which requires total invention and creativity and us holding hands together and jumping. And thank you all so much. Some of you have been on. You've all been on for more than an hour and a half. You're clearly so committed. So many of you are I see you on here have worked so hard for this. This is not the time to give up hope. This is the time to rejoin hands, to come together, like pretend we're all in a room, in a space, I immediately was thinking of in whatever space you're creating in Minnesota, JaNaé, that people want to be part of. We have to build that space. Imagine that we're in the space and we're committing whatever we can do. Money, time, talents, talking to people. We are building a movement together. We have to believe in this movement. We have to see this movement. We have to bring this into being and stop authoritarianism now, shift worldview over time to create the world that we all deserve. So thank you all so much for being here with us. Thank you to our incredible partners and all of you sending so much love and care for everything everyone's holding right now. And let's go, team. Let's do this. Let's turn this around and create the world that we need. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.